Hello, thanks for joining me. Let's talk about setting up and using your pre-qualification ratings and then handling those appeals. We'll start off with a bit of a disclaimer. I'm not a lawyer, COLBI's not a lawyer, and so this is not legal advice, but we're going to go through some codes and regulations that you might find helpful. So the DIR model is also going to be something that we talk about, and that's a guide, and we'll talk further about what I mean by the word guide. Let's get to it. Setting up and using your pre-qual rating and then handling pre-qual appeals. Pre-qualification ratings, when do you set them and how are they used? Well, according to code, and I know that's boring, but it's important sometimes to take a look at it. You set your pre-qualification rating before you put your ad out to bid. What? Why? Why don't I just decide it on the day of the bid? Well, that's because the purpose of pre-qualification is to let the contractors know what size of a project they're allowed to bid. In other words, it opens the door for them to bid. So that's the code, Public Contract Code 20111.5 for schools. And I mean, obviously, the purpose of pre-qualification is to make sure the district gets a good contractor. But the contractors use it to make sure they should spend the time, energy, and effort to put together a bid for you. So the size of the project is what the goal is here. And we're going to talk further about that. And if someone listening is not a school district, well, there's the public contract code for other public entities. And you have to do both the type of project and the size of the project. Bidders have to know if they can bid or not. Setting that minimum rating amount is the door that opens the ability for them to bid on any given project. The law was not written to disqualify folks on bid day based on the exact value of their bid. And we're going to go into a detailed look at the math and what the lawyers have said about this. They need a go, no go. They spend a lot of time, energy, and effort, not only the general contractors, but all their subcontractors. They're all working to do the best they can do for you, to get you the best price and the best project they can. And they spend hours and days on getting their bid together. And if on bid day, they're a few dollars off above their pre-qualification, that was not the intent of the law to disqualify them on bid day. Make the rating for the minimum dollars for this contract very clear on your bid documents. You'd want to put it in your ad for bid. You'd want to put it in your information for bidders and your instructions to bidders. You want to make it clear what amount of rating they need to have in order to bid this project. You know, that pre-qualification rating may or may not even match anything else you have in hand. What do I mean by that? Well, you might get an architect's opinion of cost. You might have a detailed cost estimate from a cost estimating firm. You may have just a really good idea what you think it should cost. Any of those things do matter, but really pre-qualification ratings are a risk mitigation for the district, not necessarily set by the exact cost of any given project. So don't worry if you don't have a solid value for your project. And again, I'll say, the bids on bid day could be higher than the rating amount that you've set to open the door to being able to bid. What could that look like? Let's take a look. So here's an example. You have a construction estimate of $12,321,325. Now, the likelihood of that being accurate on bid day is absolutely zero, unless you like to go to Vegas. So you notice that goes down to the $5. No, you wouldn't put an estimate of construction out to the public down to the $5. You'd just be called a liar because you can't know that. So you always round it off. That's just best practice. So you look at the project and you say, you know what? We think the project's going to bid between 11.5 and 12.5 mil. Now on bid day, it could be much lower than 11.5, or it could be a bit higher than 12.5. Especially right now in this time of unrest in the United States, getting those estimates just right is very hard. So the district has the choice, the public entity has the choice. What mitigates my risk enough to allow bidders to walk in the door, to submit a bid to me? That's what you're looking at for a pre-qualification rating. for this project. So you look at this project and you go, you know what? We talked amongst ourselves and we feel our risk is mitigated sufficiently if any general contractor has a rating of 11 million or higher. And so you decide to set it at 11 million or higher. Or you can set it at 11.5 or 12.35 or 13 million. I don't know why you would want to eliminate folks that way, but you could, it's up to you. Each project's rating is up to you. Now, the 11 million was provided during a conversation I had with a K-12 law firm here in Southern California. And I've also heard other lawyers at organizations such as CASH and CASBO speak to this. And you do not have to set it right in the middle. You don't have to set it at the top level. You don't have to set it at the bottom. You can set it below that. It's up to you. So you need to look at your bid environment, the bidders that are interested in bidding to you, and set a rating that protects you appropriately for this project. So let's take a look then what happens with the qualified contractor that has the $11 million rating. Matter of fact, he has a rating of 11.1 million. And he goes to bat and he prepares a bid, and he and his subcontractors really, really work hard. And they submit the best bid, the least expensive one they can, and it comes out to $12,286,350. You tell me, think, can I award that bid? I have an estimate of 12.3. I told them they had to be rated at 11, and now he provides a bid larger than his rating. Is that okay? Absolutely yes. Once you've set the project specific rating, in this case, you set it at 11 million and you published it at 11 million, and you provided the list of pre-qualified contractors that were 11 million and higher as able to walk in that door. They walked in the door and gave the best bid they could. And now, well, frankly, the bid bond, if they were able to bond for that much, you're able to consider their bid. It is not a bid day thing. Pre-qualification is not to harm that contractor on bid day. It is set before the bid day, and it lets them in that door. So let's talk a second about appeals. Okay, so the person that's getting that rating doesn't like their rating. Well, of course, they probably don't like their rating. If they have a rating of 10 million and you're flying a job at 11, they might think maybe there's a way that they can get a higher rating. And maybe there is, maybe there was an error, you don't know. So the law has the ability to have an appeal. So what does the law say? Well, it says that you have to have, as a public entity and as a school district, you have to have a process to allow prospective bidders to dispute their rating. Okay, so that means you have to have a process. And during that process, the bidders, the prospective bidders, those that are working to pre-qual, shall be able to get from you what the basis of their pre-qualification was. In other words, the details of your analysis to set the pre-qualification rating, including information about if it was people you contacted to find out how they did. You don't have to disclose who they were, but you can disclose that you got less than stellar information about past projects, anything that they need to know in order for them to come back to you with an appeal. And then they get to come and rebut the evidence that you've provided and present evidence to the contrary. This is a very informal process, and I'll get into that more in a second. So that's what the law says, but the law is not fully complete as to what the school district or other entity might have to put together to do this. So we're going to do that now. Let's look at the Department of Industrial Relations Labor Commissioner's model document. It has some information in there about how they recommend handling appeals for your consideration. So this DIR model, in slight ways, in my opinion, deviates a little bit from the actual language of the code. So keep that in mind as you determine your own best method. I would stay first to the code always and forever, and then review the DIR model for what you would like to incorporate into your procedure or policy. So one of the examples there is timelines. The law obviously did not talk about timelines, but The DIR model has some really good recommendations for establishing some timelines and making it so that you're not caught in the middle of having to jump to answer an appeal in a timeline that doesn't suit you. So here it is. This is an annualized process from the DIR model, pages 34 through 37. The link was on the previous slide. So this would be a 10-day final hearing, you get to know, or per project, which follows the DIR model on those pages. Either one's acceptable. You might want to have both. You might want to allow an annualized process and a per project process. That's what I would recommend, but each district does their own choices in this regard. So if you have a timeline, then you get some other things that you can do. It defines what a timely appeal is. If you have no timeline, how would you define what a timely appeal is? It would be really a term of art. But if you have a timeline established, then you can define what a timely appeal is. And you can have language in your procedure that says, if you haven't done a timely appeal, you can't challenge it now until we do another pre-qualification. I like that. That means I want to have a timeline. And it's going to be an informal process. You know what? If you don't have this language in your procedure, you're going to end up probably with 1 or 2 lawyers coming with those contractors to argue with you. So if you make sure you say it's an informal process, there's a slightly less likelihood that they'll bring a lawyer, and you don't need to bring your lawyer. It is an informal listen and share situation, and then you decide. And if the board has delegated responsibility to staff, you should list the staff titles in your procedure. That's best policy for that. Then what does the DIR model say about final actions? Well, the contractor gets to say his piece based on the information you provided when he said he wanted to appeal it. And you need to tell them whether they're going to get their way or not, or something in the middle. Some appeal best practices. You know, the person appealing may want to argue with the people that are sitting in front of them, particularly if the only person that sits in front of them is the lady they know really treated them poorly during the last construction project. And so they're not going to like pretty much anything that one person has to say. You can have an appeal panel. When I started doing this 20 years ago, 30 now, we did an appeal panel. We had a 3-person panel sit in front of the contractor and listen to what they had to say. And then the 3-person panel came to consensus and made a decision. And most importantly, we kept the biggest wig in the house out of the appeal panel, so that if the appeal panel's decision was not to their liking, they had one more layer before they felt they needed to go to the board or, you know, cause some other kind of hullabaloo. And so that's what we did. We had a 3-person panel, listen, decide, put it in writing. And then if they wanted to appeal the appeal decision, they had one more layer to go to. So the most important thing about appeals is that once you make a decision, if it deviates in any way from anything that's standard, then you're going to be setting a precedence that you want to treat everyone the same. The DIR regulations are very clear, and your lawyer will tell you that you need to be consistent with how you interpret your policies and procedures. So keep a record of the basis of the decisions and how it was or was not precedent setting as you do appeals. You really can mitigate your risk if you have a solid board policy. So you want to identify the types and sizes of the projects that will require pre-qualification. You know, you can pre-qualify even if you're not state funded, and even if you're not using lease-leaseback or design build. Of course, those 3 things are mandatory pre-qualification, but the district could have its own levels of pre-qualification. That should be clear in your policy. And you should have detailed procedures. And you should include in those procedures the various details. You know, you got the details about the timeline and who they're going to be in front of, and that it's an informal process, and etc. You'd want to have all that in your procedure. The procedure shouldn't be more than about 2 pages. It's not a big deal. The policy could be a single page. We're not talking about a lot of work, but it's so important when you're getting challenged by the contractors. So that's about it. We talked about the fact that you really need to set your rating before you let the project out to the public to bid. and you need to hold to that on bid day. You do not modify that or hold them any differently. If they walked in the door because they had pre-qualified at the rate you advertised, they get to bid. If they can't get a bid bond, they're not going to be able to bid, of course. The second thing we talked about was appeals, the fact that they're allowed. You should have a timeline, you should have a policy and procedure, and you get to decide your best practice for those. But it's very important to mitigate your risk to be able to have a cutoff time and your ability to manage those appeals well. I hope you enjoyed the session. I hope you got something, an aha moment, and COLBI is here to help. Our quality bidders team is here for you. If you're interested in learning more about any of our software products, we're here for you. Have a good day.